Good morning, everybody. We are back for another ripped from the headlines, and this time we didn't go to one of the local newspapers or the Post or JTA or anything like that. We're going a little more highbrow this morning, and it relates to an email update from the John Templeton Foundation. So the John Templeton Foundation is founded by Sir John Templeton, and they feel that their role is to support projects that are driving the future, optimistic about the future, all sorts of unique projects that are taking place in education and technology and the like. And the founder was very curious, lived through a period of a lot of technological progress and wanted to support that continued progress in the realm of ideas and science and business and the like. It will sound much better with a British accent. But so anyway, in a recent email update, there was a piece that caught my mind, that caught my attention, and it was called "Welcoming the End of Our World." And immediately in my head, the REM song, "It's the End of the World as We Know It, I Feel Fine," started playing. But what was even more interesting is that it mentioned a book by Adam Kirsch, who is a poet and literary critic, also someone who's very active writing on Judaism. He writes for Tablet. He was the literary critic for Tablet who covered Daf Yomi, and he actually wrote a book about Daf Yomi. And so I'm wondering, what is this, learned Jew, someone who I have read other of his articles, and he's talking about the end of the universe. What's going on? So let's go to the headline: "Welcoming the End of Our World." Source number one. Is the human race hurtling toward extinction? And if so, should we welcome our own demise? Most people will experience an instinctive aversion to these questions. Adam Kirsch, a poet and literary critic who loves the humanities, felt the same way. Yet in recent years, as he became aware of different voices heralding the end of humanity, he was compelled to confront these questions head on. Kirsch synthesizes this research in his latest book, "The Revolt Against Humanity: Imagining a Future Without Us." Behind this revolt are two lines of thinking, both of which led to the same humanless future. Anthropocene anti-humanists, as Kirsch calls the first group, see humanity's presence on Earth as irredeemably destructive. They argue that human values, such as equality and compassion, would be better served without us. This kind of radical environmental stance believes looking forward to a planet without people is an ultimately humane ambition. Transhumanists, on the other hand, view the loss of a conscious mind as a disaster. But they argue that a conscious mind doesn't need to be human. With increases in AI technology, we could replace ourselves with a more advanced kind of intelligence, disembodied, virtual, and superior. Transhumanists and Anthropocene anti-humanists hold very different ideas about technology, science, and the environment. Yet in a strange way, says Kirsch, they end up at the same place, which is that there's nothing essential about the existence of Homo sapiens. He continues, the idea that humanity will one day disappear, that the world will come to an end, is part of every religious system. But the difference is that in religious worldviews, this is something that's supposed to happen according to the nature of things, that God will either bring the world to an end to judge everyone, or that there's this cosmic cycle. The idea that humanity will go extinct the way other species go extinct, not as a result of the divine plan, but in the same way that dinosaurs went extinct, comes around with the mid-19th century advances in geology and then with Darwinism. The idea that it's in the course of nature for every species to evolve and emerge and then disappear is a 19th century discovery. The basic common sense instinct for all of us is to avert that disappearance as long as possible. We think that it's something that will happen in the far distant future, so far that we can't really even conceive of it. But the revolt against humanity is people who are saying, maybe this is not such a distant phenomenon. Okay, reactions, thoughts, comments. I would imagine anybody scared? The goal was not to, when I was looking for an image to send along with the email that was going out, all of them had the earth blowing up, and I didn't really want to start people's day with that. Yes, Miriam.
It is very scary. You read about this all the time. As a matter of fact, I just got a letter from, the annual radiologist for mammography that each mammogram was read by 2 doctors in the past. Now it's 1 doctor and an AI application.
Mm-hmm.
And so is the human eye going to be really obsolete?
Right. Especially this AI conversation has been going further, and one of the founders of one of the major companies has been going on a international tour raising the issue and about with regard to countries having certain laws and certain guidelines and certain safeguards in place so that that it doesn't happen. Right? For the imagery that always comes to mind is in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, when the HAL takes over everything. Thinking that, when that came out, decades ago, people were like, never going to happen, never going to happen, never going to happen. And now it's happening.
And then he reprimands Dave.
That's right. What are you doing, Dave? But here, there seems to be, some discussion, conversation, maybe even a desire that we can, move forward from whatever problems we have in this world by getting rid of the Homo sapiens. And you have some who, of the 2 groups, these Anthropocene anti-humanists seem like pretty bad actors in their desire to get us away. The transhumanists are looking at things just from a cold scientific perspective. But those Anthropocene anti-humanists, as Kirsch calls them, really seem to think that the best of humanity can exist without human beings. And so, yes.
I have read that all weapons that have been developed at some point are used, and that it is very possible that the atomic energy which we have, bombs, will be used in such a destructive way as to possibly annihilate most of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So with that cheery thought, let's it's very scary. There's a song by Genesis, Phil Collins, "This Is the World We Live In," and they have this claymation video that was very popular in the 80s. And it was when Ronald Reagan was president. And, Joe Biden was not the first president to be accused of being a little bumbling and older, although he's older than Reagan was. And, so basically the video, the song plays about the world, and, the world is dangerous, and the world, it's up to us to make sure the world doesn't tear itself apart. And Reagan is the president, and he's played out as the superhero in his dream about what's going to happen, U.S. versus USSR. And then when he wakes up, there's 2 buttons next to him, one for his attendant and one for the nukes. And he's like, boy, I can use a glass of water. And you see his hand go towards the buttons, and by accident hits the nukes button, and the world blows up. Right? So we're just millimeters away from continuity or blowing ourselves up. So that's certainly in line now with what you point out. So, since the U.S. unleashed the power of the atomic bomb in 1945, we're just a small amount away, mistake, a disagreement, an argument from something like this. And Hollywood plays into these fears, popular culture and literature plays into these fears, with all these various, films and the like about, nuclear weapons into rogue states. And of course, it's not just fantasy with Iran today. So it's definitely something that has been percolating in different ways. And now there's another front with the AI, with the AI front. So what I would like to try and do is look at some Jewish reactions, thoughts for the end. The Judaism believe in an apocalypse. That's actually the article in the source number 2. We're not going to come to a conclusion. I think from a conclusion perspective, we will be able to appreciate why Judaism places so much emphasis on living and performing commandments and our obligations in life. There's a reason why our slogan is L'chaim. And there's a mitzvah of a v'chai b'hem. We have to live with Judaism, and we set aside Judaism to save life. So we don't really want the apocalypse. At the same time, Judaism has concepts, as we see in the prophets, things like acharit hayamim, the end of days, or the Yom Hashem Hagadol V'Hanora, the day of the great, awesome, and mighty God. We have ideas of Mashiach, and we have concepts described about the war of Gog and Magog. And maybe just to, without the ability to definitively draw any conclusions, but just to see how people were addressing these subjects, both in terms of, within the literature, the classic Jewish literature that we study, and maybe even a couple of examples of how they were lived, how these lessons were then transformed into approaches to life. So, source number 2: does Judaism believe in the apocalypse? So the word apocalypse, literally translated as an uncovering, historically referred to revelations and prophecies related to the ultimate destiny of humanity, what some would call the end of days. This is the concept of eschatology. However, the term is commonly used in reference to large-scale catastrophic events leading up to the doom of humanity and the end of the world as we know it. So in answer to the question of does Judaism believe in an apocalypse, if you're referring to the original meaning, then yes, Judaism definitely believes in the apocalypse as in the coming of Mashiach and the resurrection of the dead. If, however, your question is about the apocalypse in the colloquial sense, then it's a bit more complicated. Very true. So when we talk about the end of days, we have, Maimonides believes it's a principle to believe every single day, whether, although Mashiach may tarry, I will wait every single day. You have many times you have focus on Mashiach. You had those sages, including Maimonides, strangely enough, who would try and calculate when the Messiah would come. And for others, it was a very distinct reality. I think I've mentioned before, today is Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, first day of Tammuz. On Thursday is the 3rd of Tammuz. It's the Yurtzeit of Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the late Lubavitcher Rebbe, who took the campaign for Mashiach into a whole new level at a time when so much more of the Jewish community is interconnected. Right? You think back 100 years ago, the Jewish community was not as interconnected that within days or even within hours, the entire Jewish world has access to certain messages and themes, as we do in the modern era. And Rabbi Schneerson took Mashiach to that level, right? I would imagine if I would start going, if I would say the words, "We want Mashiach," and people would immediately finish the sentence. Now, right? That was the declaration. In ways that we've had Messianic Judaism. Now, I'm not talking even the Jews for Jesus Messianic Judaism. We've had Messianic movements within Judaism. Shabtai Tzvi comes to mind. We've had predictions for when Mashiach would come. We've had the discussion within the rise of the Hasidic movement of each Hasidic group seeing their rabbi, their Rebbe as Mashiach. But I think it's inarguable that Rabbi Schneerson took it to a new level. And we also have a non-messianic strand within traditional Jewish thinking. As evidence, there's a classic statement. The Talmud in Maseches Sanhedrin, towards the end, the last chapter, deals with this subject. Rabbi Hillel said, source number 3, there will be no Messiah for Israel, since they've already enjoyed him during the reign of Hezekiah. Right? This is not the standard approach, but the Talmud, which is collecting all the various approaches to the Mashiach. There was one who said there is no Mashiach because we're living in that Messianic era. So Judaism runs the spectrum of how much effort and energy and spiritual attention. We are paying towards this eschatology, this future world. But before looking at some of the Mashiach piece, I wanted to look at the way that Rabbi Sherpin concludes his posing of the question or answering the question. If the question is about the apocalypse in the colloquial sense, right, that there will be the end of the world as we know it, it's a bit more complicated because there is a source that really raises this idea, and it's a pretty famous source in Sanhedrin 97a. It's part of that discussion in the Talmud of several pages of the end of days and Mashiach and the like. And so let's look at source number 4, and I think people are familiar with this concept. Rav Katina says, 6,000 years is the world, and it is in ruins 1,000. As it is stated, the Lord alone shall be exalted on that day. And the day of God lasts 1,000 years. As this verse in Psalm says, a day for you is like 1,000 years. Abaya says it is in ruins for 2,000 years. As it is stated, after 2 days he will revive us, and the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his presence. It has been taught in accordance with the opinion of Rav Katina. Just as the sabbatical year abrogates deaths once in 7 years, so too the world abrogates its typical existence for 1,000 years in every 7,000 years. As it is stated, the Lord alone shall be exalted on that day, and it states a song for the Shabbat day, meaning 1,000 years. This is the entirely Shabbos. And it says for 1,000 years in your eyes is but like yesterday when it is past. So here's an idea that the world will exist for 6,000 years. And we know that, that number plays into the way we Torah date our current existence, right? What year is it now? 5783, right? So that's the Torah timeline from the story of Adam to today, 5783. So everyone, is checking your calendar, checking your watch, 5783. All right, so we have, 217 years left. I think we're all covered. And as good as they're getting with lengthening life, I think we probably won't hit 217 in the near future. So 6,000 years. So what does that mean? The world will last for 6,000 years. What are some of the ramifications of this teaching? Some thoughts.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I'm only 94, but I'm looking forward to that day.
To 217 years from now, or Mashiach coming?
Right.
Well, he could come today.
You never know.
That's right. We don't give up hope. But what does this mean, 6,000 years? And again, keep this within the context of the Talmud. The Talmud is coming, is essentially, these are the teachings of some 2,000 years ago. 1,600 years ago, 1,700 years ago. This is a teaching of, what lesson, is Rav Katina trying to impart? Or there's certainly several options.
Well, know that there's mortality and value everything that you have in terms of, doctrines, mitzvot, life with friends, family, it's just to accentuate that.
Right. So look, I think there's certainly recognize that everything is finite is certainly a lesson. Look, some learn from this, including the Rashba, who was a prominent scholar in the 13th century, Rav Dan Isaac Abarbanel in the 15th century. They understand this as literal. The world will return to nothingness. It's got a 6,000 year shelf life. Right after that, it expires, and that will be the end. Now, I think it was probably easier for to look at Rav Katina saying this 2,000 years ago than it is as the clock ticks down to 6,000. Interesting fact, this whole idea of chronology that in the Jewish history timeline, in the timeline that we have, taking us to 5783 and lining that up with where we are in the secular date of 2023. there's a major chronological discrepancy between the way the rabbis date the destruction of the first temple and the secular dating of the destruction of the first temple. There's about 160 some odd years. And so it's very possible that this year, if we follow the secular calculation, this is not 5783 on the Jewish timeline. It is 5946 on the Jewish timeline. 5946 means that we've only got another 54 years till the end of that 6,000. And please God, some of us, all of us will make it. 54 is, puts the oldest among us, maybe in striking distance of how long they'll have a life last. So now that I've scared everybody, but no, so there's some who look at this literally, and maybe when you dig down deeply into some of the Kabbalistic sources with regards to the universe, and there's this idea even of God destroying previous worlds and the like, that give us, some stop. Let's not try to dig any more deeply into this, but that's what's going to happen. That's the destruction. Some look at it as not literal destruction, but it will be the destruction of evil, right? You want to destroy things that are bad. The goodness will remain, but the evil will be destroyed. And that's the whole idea of the 1,000 years of Shabbos, the 1,000 years of more serenity and spirituality and peace, and that and people look at what's been happening over the last hundreds of years, and we've certainly seen a fair share of some of that destruction, and so we're heading towards as bad as it gets, and then we'll begin the upward traversing of things till we end up in 1,000 years of Mashiach, of Shabbos, and the like. Source number 5 is Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad. He is known as also the Ben Ish Chai. We've referenced him before in his Ben Yehoyada commentary on Sanhedrin. So he says the following, that how do we understand the world will be 6,000 years? He says in the Hebrew, we'll translate, Ein hakavana sheyeh bo charva v'shemema, chas v'shalom. Can't be, God forbid, there'll be destruction. Ela kavana hateva v'chomer shemotzui b'shisha alafim shana, yecharav yitchadesh teva v'chomer acher me'ula v'yafa ma'od. Things will get better. All of the science and technology and materials that have been developed in the 6,000 years will be transformed into something better. That she'ein bo taroves ra ve'ein bo yagon v'anacha v'yisurin, doesn't have any admixture of evil, will not have sadness or pain or suffering, no evil whatsoever. Elahi kulo tov gamor v'tanu yafem u'tukan. Everything will be easy and set up for us without hard work. All right, maybe we're heading that way. The technological revolution, maybe some of these things can do that for us, right? We'll have whatever we really want is is within our hands, within our grasp, at our call and beckon. You don't have to go anywhere. You have everything you need brought to you. The pharmacy delivers, the food delivers, everything can be brought to you. You can say things. Tell me, who won the Academy Award in 1947, and Siri or Alexa will take care of it for you.
And we have you on screen. What
exactly. Well, you can't get better than that. So we're at it. We've reached a point that maybe we are closer to 6,000. Maybe it is 5946, and in the next couple of decades we'll figure out everything else that's wrong, and we'll be into that 1,000 years of peace and paradise. So there is within the discussion within traditional Jewish sources this idea that there will be a destruction, and it comes from some of the references in the prophets and some of the of this. There is a kind of Jewish apocalypse and an end of days in the real sense of the word. However, it never really becomes the focus. It never really becomes the focus, even if we're talking about belief in the future of Mashiach and the like. It doesn't turn. This idea of the world being destroyed literally is not something that that captures a lot of attention or gains a lot of traction in traditional Jewish sources. it does in Christianity, right? There's a whole, literature, the rapture and all those things. But for us, the sources are there, most likely, definitely influenced by the prophets, but not there. Just also, important to note, the Torah, 5 books of Moses, Chumash, has very little to say about the end of days. In fact, when they try to seek out source for resurrection in the Torah, the closest they have is the fact that the Torah seems to say that Aaron will eat from the priestly gifts that are given agriculturally. Right? We give truma to the Kohen, and there seems to be an indication that says that Aaron will eat it. And the rabbis say, how can Aaron eat the truma? How can Aaron eat the priestly gifts that will be given from the agriculture in the land of Israel? As we'll read in this week's parsha, Aaron dies. He never gets to Israel. So how will Aaron actually eat these gifts? That's how we know there's a resurrection. Because at some point, Aaron will be resurrected and he'll eat these gifts in the land of Israel. It's a reach. It's a stretch. But that's what leads to a couple of approaches with regards to the Mashiach. And we're going to look at kind of 2 approaches. We'll see how the lived experience of waiting for Mashiach played out in the time remaining. So let's talk about the Rambam, because the Rambam very much introduces us to Mashiach. He is the one who gave us the Ani Ma'amins, or the intellectual basis for the Ani Ma'amins, and we have there this idea of Mashiach. We also have the idea of resurrection. So the Rambam in the Laws of Kings, the end of the Laws of Kings deals with Mashiach. We'll look at laws 1, 2, and 4. Do not presume that in the Messianic age, any facet of the world's nature will change, or there will be innovations in the work of creation. Rather, the world will continue according to its pattern. He also, by the way, does not seem to be bothered by a 6,000-year timeline. Although Isaiah states, the wolf will dwell with the lamb, the leopard will die down with the young goat. These words are metaphor and parable. The interpretation of the prophecy is as follows. Israel will dwell securely together with the wicked Gentiles who are likened to a wolf and a leopard, as in the prophecy of Jeremiah, a wolf from the wilderness shall spoil them, and a leopard will stalk their cities. They will all return to the true faith and no longer steal or destroy. Rather, they will eat permitted food at peace with Israel, as Isaiah states, the lion will eat straw like an ox. Similarly, other messianic prophecies of this nature are metaphors. In the messianic era, everyone will realize which matters were implied by these metaphors and which allusions they contained. It's all metaphors. You don't have to interpret it literally. And if you have questions, don't worry, they'll all be answered at that time also. So we'll figure it out. Right? Of course, anytime you invoke this, you have to explain how it was in the museum, in the zoo in Jerusalem. They had an exhibit of the lion and the lamb. And the visitors were shocked. How do you have an exhibit with the lion and the lamb together? In fulfillment of the prophet of Isaiah. So the Jewish zookeeper said it's very easy. Each day we put in a new lamb. So we can make things happen.
Good one.
Yeah. So but this fits with the Rambam. The Rambam in general, as we have seen in other places, allows for a non-literal interpretation of non-legal portions of the Bible. The whole book of Genesis, for example, and throughout his guide is the Rambam was the first to help bridge the gaps between science and the Torah by pointing out it's not always literal. And the same thing here. We should not understand these prophecies as literal. They were prophecies delivered to the Jewish nation in the fact that they will be fulfilled in some way, in a non-literal way. And that's nothing miraculous. It starts giving rise to thinking about what kind of technological innovations there may be in the third temple. Will they have, what will they be using that will make things work easier there? We'll have to wait and see. But this does occupy the attention of many who are trying to figure it out and would like to make it. They feel that if we can figure it out and then we can make it happen. Okay, the Rambam continues, and all of these things and things like them, people won't really know how it will be until it happens, because these things are not explicit in the prophet's words, and the sages also don't have a received tradition about these things, just an interpretation of the verses. Therefore, they argue about these things. Right? Think about the Talmud and Sanhedrin. Mashiach will come this, Mashiach will come that. Mashiach already came. They argue about these things. And in any case, there's no order to these things happening. The details of them is not necessary to the religion. A person should never study the tales or spend a long time on the midrash told about these issues and things like them. They shouldn't be made to be essential since they bring about neither awe nor love. Right? In general, where's the Rambam focused on in terms of Judaism? What's the ultimate? Through what are we connected to God? Torah, study, intellect. You know, these things give rise to emotion, to non-resolvable queries. There's no answer. Focus on other aspects, which will bring one closer to God in a real sense. Right? And he would probably not appreciate a Mashiach campaign being run. Mashiach, yes. Mashiach, getting everyone to focus on Mashiach now, less so. And then you can source for the last law in source 6, the sages and the prophets did not yearn for the Messianic era in order to have dominion over the entire world, to rule over the Gentiles, to be exalted by the nations, or to eat, drink, and celebrate. Rather, they desired to be free to involve themselves in Torah and wisdom without any pressures or disturbances, so that they would merit the world to come, as explained in Hilchot Shuvah. Right, this actually Hebrew is Lo nitavu hachachamim v'hanavim yimot haMashiach. It was a Miami Boys Choir or a Silva Zemer song back in the day. That the goal here was not, for any power or control, right? The goal, yearning for Messianic era, was for a time that would be like the 1,000 years of Shabbos, as presented by Rav Katina. But he does say so that they would merit the world to come. What is that world to come? Which is also part of this eschatological discussion. The world, is it spiritual? Is it physical? Is it miraculous? So, the Rambam has more of a, it's really all about the ability to get knowledge of God or true knowledge of God. But what does he reference? At the end of source 6, he references the laws of Tshuva. So what does he say there? So that's the next, the end of the source. A person should not say, I will fulfill the mitzvot of the Torah and occupy myself in its wisdom in order to receive all the blessings which are contained within it, or in order to merit the life of the world to come. Similarly, I will separate myself from all the sins which the Torah warned against, so that I will be saved from all the curses contained in the Torah, that my soul will not be cut off from the life of the world to come. It is not fitting to serve God in this manner, right? You're not interested in thinking about these things. A person whose service is motivated by these facts is considered one who serves out of fear. He's not on the level of prophets or the wise. The only ones who serve God in this manner are common people, women and minors. They are trained to serve God out of fear until their knowledge increases, as they serve out of love. Right? The Rambam looks at the common people or the unenlightened people as being more focused on what are we getting out of this after this world, and it's more important in this world. And this, there are different approaches in the Rambam, but for the Rambam, it was all, how to get close to God through knowledge, through wisdom, through observance of Torah, rather than thinking about what this will mean in the world to come. It leads to a very here and now kind of Judaism. Just to take it forward, just in the intellectual airs of the Rambam, we see this. So, for example, what comes to mind is for the question: why do bad things happen to good people? So, what's it called? The author Kushner, who wrote that book, passed away recently. But Rav Soloveitchik, when he addressed this question, it's not why do bad things happen to good people. It's more what should we do when the bad things happen to good people. It was more finding a path forward and not getting lost in the speculation to try and understand it. And that's very much where the Rambam is going. You can't. There are plenty of sources and teachings, but we can't control or resolve what's going to happen till it happens. So the focus shouldn't be there. And he charged people who want to focus on that. And that's then he calls that a very, unsophisticated, basic level of serving God out of fear instead of out of love. Questions, comments on the Rambam's approach?
Rabbi,
Yes.
scientists have speculated, you probably have read about it, that an intergalactic event may occur at some time in the unknowable future, which will destroy the Earth.
Correct. Look, there could be, maybe that's what the rabbis were referring to. They had a very enlightened and forward thinking view of astronomy. It's certainly all possible. It's certainly all possible. But the question is, how much sleep are you going to lose over it? I would try to encourage people to lose less sleep over it. But that's not how it works. Otherwise, they wouldn't make movies about it. They know that this piques our curiosity. So look, no one is saying that Judaism does not believe in this idea that there's punishment and to instruct, be good or God will get you. That's not, that concept does exist, but it's a less desirable, it's a less optimal level for the Rambam. All right. So before we look at another approach, and that's the Ramban, who did see this as a more real focus of Judaism, there have been a lot of interesting discoveries of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Right, the Dead Sea Scrolls, Qumran. I think they're the Essenes, a sect of Jews who separated from the rest of the community towards the end of the Second Temple era, and we found, of course, the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they are focused a lot on spirituality, on ritual, on strict observance, and they also have certain explanations of prophecies that seem to be talking about an end of days in different prophets. In particular, Habakkuk. Right, Habakkuk is the one of the 12 minor prophets, and there seems to would seem to address some of these this idea of an end of days, a vision of the future and the like. And next to certain verses, there was what's called the Perush. Right? If anyone's not familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls, I'm not familiar with them. I've heard of them, learned a little bit about them. So they have some of the biblical fragments, and then there's the interpretation. So these are two interpretations from Habakkuk, which are addressing the Messiah. And it seems that part of the reason the Essenes left from everyone else is that the rest of the Jewish community seemed to be heading in a downward spiral, which may lead to destruction. Remember, the Romans were there. It was not a very peaceful time. And they were trying to bring about a repair in that by their type of life, in the hopes that they would be, the remnant of Israel, which is also a term used by the prophets, the She'erit Yisrael, who would be able to bring about the redemption. But they mention, and this is source number 7, its interpretation that the final end may be prolonged, indeed longer than anything of which the prophet spoke, for the secrets or mysteries of God are for wondrous fulfillment. It's the idea that Mashiach should be here, but he's not, because the mysteries are greater than we've been able to try and unlock. So maybe we thought we were doing the right thing. Mashiach should be here, but the fact that Mashiach is not means that there's still more to come. Kind of brings to mind that the whole Shabtai Tzvi scenario. Shabtai Tzvi claimed to be Messiah, and he went around and he was very persuasive and convincing. He was convincing people that Tisha B'Av should be over because Mashiach is here, and to eat on Tisha B'Av and the like. And then he was making his way towards Israel, and he's making his way through the Ottoman Empire, the Turkey area, and this is the Sultan does not need this type of uprising, this type of sentiment being spreading out throughout the Jewish community. So he has Shabtai Tzvi arrested and gives him an ultimatum: convert to Islam or I'll kill you. And Shabtai Tzvi converts to Islam. So, Mashiach can't be Muslim, can he? And Shabtai Tzvi had a response. No, I need to become Muslim so that as part of the redemptive process, I can go infiltrate their religion and lift that up too. Right? There are lots of mysteries. The secrets or mysteries of God are for wondrous fulfillment. So just when you think you know what needs to be done to bring Mashiach, there's another layer that you don't understand.
The original mystery is Yaakov, where he did not tell them. Initially wanted to tell them what is down.
Right. And these are all, parts of that idea. I mean, I'm not so sure that's what the Essenes are talking about, but within the tradition, Yaakov wanted to reveal when Mashiach would come, and it didn't work. His eyes were closed. These are all extensions of that concept. A second comment from the Dead Sea Scrolls: its meaning concerns the men of truth who carry out the law and do not let their hands grow too weak to serve the truth, despite the final end being long drawn out. For all the limits set by God will come in their due time, as he has set for them in his mysterious wisdom. Here's the idea that it's the responsibility of the leaders not to let the delay bring the Jewish nation down. There's still more work to be done. So just as an example of the lived experience in messianic or messianic or eschatological expectations, here you have some comments of how people, were thinking about this. And remember, I think this very much is expressed in the words of the Rambam. It definitely is mentioned in the some of the statements of the rabbis in the Talmud. But this is kind of, the lived experience of those living 2,000 years ago when it comes to Mashiach. So I just, wanted to include that in the discussion. And now we'll look at Rabbi Josh Shamaru in a class at virtual Beit Midrash, the VBM of the Gush virtual Beit Midrash, summarizes the Ramban's understanding. Ramban's understanding of the end of days brings out the way in which he is in radical disagreement with the Rambam about providence, reward, and punishment. Recall that for the Rambam, the true reward for the righteous intellectual is olam haba, spiritual existence, in which one is occupied exclusively with knowing God. This is what is not granted so much as achieved. Whatever level one achieves in one's life continues into a spiritual existence afterwards. Punishment is not active suffering so much as the absence of reward, with the ultimate punishment being karet, which the Rambam understands to be simple annihilation. A person who receives karet does not have any continuation in olam haba. There is no hell, according to Rambam, where the wicked are punished for their evil ways. Their punishment is that they cease to exist when they die. Rabbinic statements which indicate otherwise are either to be disregarded as minority opinions or interpreted metaphorically. Again, as we saw the Rambam inside, in his own words saying this, Amar and I would just tease it up because the Ramban finds this vision both morally offensive and in conflict with the Talmud. Particularly the notion there's no active divine punishment flies in the face of many statements of Chazal and undermines the belief in divine justice. God both rewards and punishes, says the Ramban, both in this life and after one is dead. Gan Eden is a spiritual place in which the righteous souls wait until they receive their final level of Tchiyat HaMeitim in Olam Haba. Its parallel is Gehenna, where the wicked are punished. The existence of Gehenna ensures divine justice. Every good or evil action has a consequence and is rewarded or punished, either during one's lifetime or afterwards. It is worth noting that though he asserts that Gehenna is a place of fire, the Ramban does not offer up much in terms of elaborate explication of the suffering experienced there, right? And just, in my own religious worldview, I'm more likely to say there is no Gehenna because the Rambam has very much influenced the path of at least my religious upbringing, education, and experience. But for the Ramban, there is, it doesn't describe it too much, but it does exist. And so there's a much, I guess, more vibrant, imaginative, creative afterlife or outside of this world's experience eschatologically for the Ramban, which is very real. And for the Ramban, when Chazal said what they said and the rabbis and the Talmud said what they said, they meant it. And we should not look at it as, we should not look at it metaphorically. And, for some, this more colorful, imaginative explication works. The more, the more we can appreciate Gan Eden and the more we fear Gehenna, that could impact our religious experience. And for the Ramban, that was important. For the Rambam, less so. So does Judaism believe in the apocalypse? We believe in a world to come. We believe in a world to come that either can be pictured or that should inspire us to live our best lives now. in terms of an eschatological realm, in terms of a life, universe-destroying event, cataclysmic event as is being predicted and feared every other day in the newspapers. Judaism says we're in the year 6000. We either have more time or less time, but that teaching made me just mean that when that year comes, things will get a whole lot better. I kind of prefer the Rambam. We should live our best lives now as to the best of our abilities. And maybe as the REM song, the end of the world as we know it, but I feel fine.
And Phil Oakes is somewhere in between. He's very, very pessimistic, but he talks about the afterlife, so to speak.
Right, but he's much more Greek than Jewish.
Yeah.
All right. If there are questions, that's good, because we'll keep thinking about this until Mashiach comes, right? That's the whole teku, tishbi yatares kushos v'yabayis. Eventually, when Mashiach comes, we'll get answers to all our questions.